Hello, everyone. My name is Gert Gullentops, presenting from Belgium on creating websites with SXA in 15 minutes. On the agenda for today, we'll start with a short introduction so that you know what we're actually talking about or what we are trying to solve. We'll go through some SXA multi-site features that come out of the box and also check some best practices about those. But we'll also go one step further, which will be a bit of customizing, because we can do better on site generation, enhancing the templates, on sharing stuff, and so on. But we'll start in the beginning. So we had a customer, a company, one company, with a website on Sitecore. Their corporate website. But this company has several subdivisions. This could also be brands or anything related. But people within those subdivisions, they were creating websites, usually smaller websites, on all kinds of different platforms. Could be WordPress, could be Drupal, things like that. The result was that there was no global overview of everything that was out there on the internet relating the company or even the name of the company. It's hard to maintain, it's hard to keep secure. And for the IT department of this company, as well as for the marketing department, this is really not good. But as with most problems, there also is an opportunity. So we could build a multi-site solution in their Sitecore environment. This would give them the same hosting, use the same tagging, use the same security, and so on. So our goal, it's actually a multi-site setup. Sounds pretty easy. And we do also want easy and fast setup of new sites. Because yeah, we are competing here to the WordPresses and such. It should be easy to maintain, not just the one site, but all the sites. We need flexible features because we will be creating a lot of sites and yeah, they won't all be the same, of course. We want, well, no deploys, meaning we don't want to have to do a deploy when creating a new website. And if possible, we might want to share some data and some content, because there are some pages that otherwise we need to create over and over again. As a development team working on this solution, we thought, let's aim high. Really high. We want this to be a really good solution for the customer. 15 minutes to create a website. That was our goal. The requirements for the website, first of all, flexible content pages and components. Sounds rather logical if you're working in a Sitecore environment. Optionally, we need a login. So some of those websites might not be open to the full public and are, well, sort of hidden after a login page or behind a login page. We need flexible language settings because our environment has quite a few languages already. And while not all those websites will contain all those languages. We might have one which is in English and French, we might then have one with English only. And who knows, maybe some of those websites would require new languages. Of course, it should be possible to have a different look and feel, including the logo. So by default, the sites can have the same look and feel as the corporate website, but we should be able to make a real difference. And then standard requirements like a navigation, a search box, GDPR compliancy, and so on. We can also make a few assumptions. We will be sharing the templates. So the data and structure will be the same. We will also be sharing the layouts, the renderings, the rendering variants, and even the page designs. So the HTML structure of our pages and components will be the same. But we can still use CSS, of course, to make them really look different. And also, we need to try to keep everything, almost everything, possible. Meaning, if there is a small request for a certain website to make some change, we should be able to do that without affecting all the others. We will be doing this with the Sitecore Experience Accelerator, SXA. This has multi-site features out of the box. We'll have a look at those and also check some best practices. Let's start with SXA multi-site management. Within SXA, you have sites and you have tenants. A tenant will group multiple related sites. This means it will have the templates for those sites, and it will give you, for instance, the option to share content between the sites. You also have tenant and site folders. They can be used to create some structure in your backend. Our solution looks like this. We have one tenant, it's called Mini, and we have two site folders. They're called Master and Sites. We'll come back later to the sites itself. But we created these two folders because we want a master folder where we as development team place the sites that we created that we need for the solution. This sites folder is our first folder. We could create more if we want. This is a folder to create the real sites that actually will go live, that will be created by the customer. If you create a lot of sites within an instance with SXA, you can use the SXA Site Manager. It's a useful tool that you can find in the PowerShell toolbox. And it will show you all the sites on your instance and an indication whether they are accessible. So it looks like this. Let's zoom in a bit, and then you see a list of all the sites on the instance with their environment. So we have a live and preview environment, as you can see, and with the URLs that are attached. And here you can see whether they are accessible or not. Let's move on to cross-site sharing. So still all out of the box. SXA will let you share styles, data sources, page and partial designs, and rendering variants between all the sites within one tenant. How do we do this? On your tenant item, you will find a sharing section And here you can select the site or sites to share from. In our case, in our solution, we only have one site to share from, and it's called shared. Makes sense. So that will be the site where we set up everything that will be shared through all the other sites. We can also share pages. This is done through delegated areas. To do this, you go to your source item, and in the Configure tab, you will find to create a clone. If you do that, SXA will ask you to create a delegated area. You click yes, and the clone is created. To get an overview of what you all cloned or your delegated areas, you can go to the destination site. In our case, that's our base site. And in the settings, you will find the shared sites settings item, and that will give you an overview of all the delegated areas. You can also share themes. So the themes are your CSS and JavaScript for your site. Of course, a site can have its own theme, but you also have compatible themes. You can set those in the settings item of the shared site. We have two here that can be selected from, and those two themes will be available to all the sites within that tenant. So this is a way to share themes. Let's go over to some best practices. Note that these best practices are not a must in every multi-site solution. In our case, however, we need them because, well, we want fast setup, easy maintenance, so we will be sharing as much as possible. And in that case, these best practices are really useful. So let's have a look. First one, really important then, is to create a master site, to clone all the new sites. Our master site is called base, so it's next to our shared site. And this site will contain all our basic functionality, all the settings that we want in our sites regarding sharing and so on, and even some default content. This content that can be normal pages, it can also be delegated areas. And then from this base site, we will use SXA site cloning. Why do it this way? Because site cloning is not only much faster, it's also less error prone in comparison to creating a new site. Because this way, we can really create this base site as we want, set everything as needed, and all those settings and content will be copied. Next one is regarding styles. Because if we're using a shared style, a shared site, we might end up with redundant styles because locally we have those same styles. So you might want to set the shared site as the exclusive style container, meaning the only site that contains styles. So we will be removing all the styles from the base site. We will do the same for the rendering variants. Remove all of them from the base site. If you don't, you might end up, for instance, for the rich text component with two default variants. They will be the same, but it's confusing, of course, for editors. Also, good practice to define your page and partial designs in the shared site. Keep them centrally and maintain them there. Of course, if you have a really specific page design to one site, you can still do that locally. Content-wise, we've already seen that data sources are shared and that we can use delegated areas to share pages across sites. We create them in the base site, we edit them in the shared site, and if you want to overrule them, you can easily do that by deleting the clone on your local, the created site. I want to add one more, and that's especially if you're going multi-site, use variants and styles and use them as they should be used. Meaning, in a very simplistic way, use variants for your HTML changes and styles for your CSS changes. Don't create a red and blue variant because, well, your next theme might not be red and blue. So now we've seen a lot of things that come out of the box, and they're nice. We can do already a lot with those, but we can do better. We can optimize a bit more, we can share a bit more, we can create an even better experience. Now let's start with some enhancements to the templates. Why do we do this? Well, I'm repeating this quote from David Sanfilippo. I've used it before in some presentations. Because, well, it tells why we do this. We want to make it easy for our authors. Simple as that. One way to do that is to set sources or data sources on the fields of your templates. And in SXA, really if you're going multi-site, they help you with the SXA tokens. One of those tokens, for instance, is the site token. It will be replaced by the path to your site. But note that those SXA tokens only work when your data source starts with query. Normally this is not a problem. But we also have treelist fields, and we want to keep using those treelist fields. Our treelist field also supports query. But I'd rather use the data source notation because then I can use things like the include templates for display or include templates for selection. So how do we fix this? Well, kudos to Kamerich Shaman on this one. He wrote years ago, actually, already a blog post that solved, I think, at least 90% of our problem. It was about a tokenized tree list. We had to change a few little things to make it work with SXA and SXA tokens. One of those things is to return a default value from the query, otherwise the standard values will fail. But if we have this custom field, now we can use a data source as shown on the slide. So we can use a query with SXA tokens, and we can still set like include templates for selection. This is pretty neat and will help our editors a lot. I've put a link to my blog post where you can find the full source code for this field if you want. We'll not go into the details here, and we'll repeat this on other sections in this session again. So all the code is available for free. And you can read all the details, but will not go in all the details within this session. That would lead us too far. So we move on to the media field, image field, which also usually has a data source. And in that data source, the site media token is used a lot. This site media token resolves to the virtual media folder within your site. So an SXA site out of the box has several folders in its root. Actually, you have the home, the data, presentation, and so on, and also a media folder. The problem with this token was that it's not possible to combine the token with a deeper path. So we can't say site media / SUGCON 2021. But this is actually what we want to do to get our editors directly into the right folder and not in the root of the site media. So we're going to create a custom token. And this is a small assumption, but it's valid in our case. We'll have it resolved to the first virtual child of that virtual media folder. By default, this will be correctly. As you can see in the screenshot, by default, the virtual children, you will have 2. And the first one is actually pointing towards the media section of your site, and that's what we want. So we'll create a custom token. As mentioned, the full source is available, but we need to create a processor. It has to be placed in the resolved tokens pipeline. You can patch it after the standard tokens, but make sure to put it before the escape query tokens. If you don't, you will probably find that your code doesn't work, and that's related to a bunch of number signs that get parsed in there. If you have done this, you can use queries like this. So we call our new token media site root, and then we can say /content/blog, and our editor will enter into the blog folder when he needs to select an image. In this case, we will have a quick look at the code because we have a few things here which are nice if you're writing multi-site stuff in SXA. So the first thing is we're using the multi-site context. It's a pretty useful one. It can give you access to folders, items that you need. In our case, it gives us directly access to the site media item, which makes it pretty easy then to get the first virtual child. The rest of our code is also pretty simple because the resolve tokens processor gives us a replace token with item path function that, well, actually does all the work for us. So a pretty easy piece of code for a custom token, which really helps our editors because they get into the correct media folder immediately. However, you need to make sure that the resulting folder exists. If it doesn't, you really get a nasty error. Luckily for us, the base site really helps here. So if we set all the folders correctly in the base site, this cloning stuff will make sure that everything is also correct in all our other sites. So the media folders are cloned as well. Let's have a look at this cloning that we've been talking about. You go to the site item of the site that you want to clone, you right click, and then you can go to scripts. There you will find clone site. If you do that, you get a pop-up. You can give your site a name and also set the names of the items that will define your site definitions. Just press OK, and the script will copy your whole site, meaning all the content, all your settings, and as mentioned before, the complete media library, items, and structure. It will also create for you an empty forms folder, and then it will change all the necessary references accordingly. So actually it creates a full copy of that base site, which is working completely. The new site is generated next to the original one, so in the same folder. Remember this picture, that's a structure that we created. So we have a master folder with our base site. And it's this base site, our master site, that we will start cloning from. But that means that the new site normally would get in our master folder. And that's not what we want. We want it in the sites folder, or actually then in any folder on that level, within the same tenant, of course. So let's try to do this. Cloning is done with Sitecore PowerShell extensions. In the SXA script library, you will find the SXA multisite folder, and there you have all the functions and so on regarding cloning. First thing that we need to do is to change the show clone site dialog, or create our own version of it. Here we have added a drop list to select a parent. Now once the parent is selected, we needed to change the clone site. That's a bit main function where we then read and use that parent information to clone the site in the correct folder. We also needed to change the copy site function, because that's where the media folder is created. And of course, we want our media folders to have the same structure as our sites. So that also had to go into another folder. You can find the full script there. It's too long to put in the presentation, but well, who knows, maybe in a next version of SXA, this will be something out of the box. And let's move on to sharing. So we've seen that we can already share quite a bit out of the box. But yeah, we can still do better. First, let's have a look at placeholder settings. So placeholder settings will manage the renderings that can be added in a placeholder. It's something very typical, as not for SXA, but for Sitecore. But within SXA, you do this per site. Within Sitecore, so with items that get placed on the placeholder settings folder. Now, in our solution where we want to share as much as possible, it seems like a good question. Can't we put these placeholder settings in our shared site? Keep them there, maintain them there, and not copy them all over to all our sites. We can do this. We need to implement the iLayouts page context. We will inherit the layouts page context to keep as much functionality that comes out of the box as possible, because we only need to override one function, get SXA placeholder item, and register our code. Code is available, but let's have a look at this one, because we're using a principle and some code here that, well, will come back a lot in solutions that have to do with sharing like this. So as mentioned, the get SXA placeholder item. The first thing we will do is call the base function, so the out of the box one. If that has any results, we just return those and get out. So that's actually the base implementation. Why do we do this? Because if we find any placeholder items on our current, meaning the local site, then we assume you want to use those. That's actually our override. If it's defined locally, we use that. Our shared site is actually a fallback. So if nothing was defined locally, we will use the shared sites context, which is another pretty neat context to use within SXA, as it gives you access to all the shared sites. And there we will go and look for placeholder items. If we find any, we will return those, and those will be used. So we first check locally. If we can't find them, we get them from the shared site. This way, we can also still override anything that was done in the shared site with just configuring it locally, and no code changes are needed. Then let's move to some SXA site settings. As you will know, a lot of settings can be defined on SXA, well, the settings item or the site definitions item and so on. So we thought, let's have a look what we can do there, if we can even share a few of those. And we started with the robots. So you can define the robots content per site. And this is used in the get robots content pipeline. So it will first check the current site. And we notice then there is a fallback already to the robots.txt file. As this already has a fallback to something that is, well, shared, but then shared through the whole environment. We decided to keep this as is. So we're not going into further details, but note, if you do want to do something with that robots, there is a pipeline where you can do anything that you want. Then we had a look at the Fab icon. So you can set a Fab icon on the site. We're using the Fab icon rendering to present that on all the sites. And this rendering is using the Fab icon repository. And in this case, we did change the function that actually gets the Fab icon. Same principle as shown before, so we're not going to show that code again. We're checking the local site. If our Fab icon is empty, we will go and fetch it from the shared site. This way we can keep the corporate logo as Fab icon just on one place. Same principle actually that are we using for the 404 settings. So created the 404 page. It even can be in a delegated area. There's a settings item for the 404 page, the page not found link. And an error page link provider with a function that gets that item. And we can override that and fetch it from the shared site if we don't have anything local. And then again, a bit bigger, the available renderings. So this is the list of renderings that's available within your SXA toolbox. As of version 1.8, it will also define the structure of the toolbox. Well, if you want to, if you have checked the checkbox that will do this. The available renderings are also set per site. So they're all children of the available renderings item. So we ask the same question again. Can't we just do this in our shared site and maintain them there and don't worry about all our local sites? We can, but the solution that I will be showing here only works if the checkbox to group the renderings according to the available rendering items in the site is checked. You will see immediately why. Well, we are going to change the available rendering ordering service. The service will read the configuration. It will use this to structure the toolbox. And well, actually as sort of a side effect, the available renderings are filtered again. And why am I saying here again? Because actually the filtering was already done one step earlier. And that has actually also had to do with that checkbox. So if that checkbox is not checked, this service isn't used. And then the filtering is done on another place. So you should have another solution if this checkbox is not checked. But we always check this. I like that solution. So we will be changing the available renderings ordering service. It's the get ordered renderings function that we need. And again, same principle, we create a fallback. If no renderings are found locally, we will try the shared sites by using the shared sites context. One small thing different here, you really need to patch the services registration, so through your configuration, to have your code added. Full source code available, it's a bit too much on the slide here, but it works like a charm, and we could delete all the available renderings from our base site. So all our new created sites will have nothing in there and get just all their information from the shared site. Then let's move on to partial designs. So partial designs are a set of renderings. They are used for, well, consistent styling, easier page creation. Headers and footers are examples that are used a lot with partial designs, and they get bundled into page designs and then assigned to a page. They're maintained centrally. They cannot be changed on a page, and this is something that developers that start to work with SXA sometimes struggle with. In version 10.1, the latest one so far, they added page branches. A page branch will define pre-configured pages for your content authors, so they specify renderings and data sources. A lot similar like page designs. But the page branch will be used as a template, so they can be changed. We can set insert options by rules, and they can also be used from our shared site. So in some cases, this could be a solution to some problems that we might have. But well, yeah, we're not on version 10.1. We've built this solution on 9.2. So we have page designs and partial designs in our shared site. We used it for the header, including the logo, for the footer with some text and links, and for some meta information. But what if we need to override some data sources, some content? And yes, we do need to do this because, for instance, that logo, we want to be able to change that. We will be creating two new components. First of all is for the rich text. Create a new component called rich text shared. This new component will check the current site if a suited data source is found by matching the location. And if it's not, we'll just use the original data source, which comes from the shared site. So we will be using this new component in our partial designs, of course. Full code available, but what we actually just did was create a variance controller with a get model function. First of all, well, of course, we need to verify if we have a data source. And if we do, we use string replacement on the data source path, which we can do with the functions of the shared site's context, where we can fetch the data item or the settings item of the shared site. And we try to find that item in the current site. If we find an item on the same location, we will use that and assign it to the model.item. And we just use our model and view that come from SXA for the rich text component. And that's it, we're good to go. We did the same for the HTML snippet because we needed that as well. Same idea. this case, we need to use the HTML snippet controller, because on the get model, we have to be able to set the HTML property for the HTML snippet to work. Code again in the blog, free for you to use. We need to move on because we still have some extra features that we need to tackle. We still need a login, we still need some languages. So let's start with the login. This is out of the box SXA actually. First of all, we create a login page. We create this in the base site. Why do we do this? Because in the layout section of the login page, you have to set the controller and controller action as shown in the image. This is needed to keep the login page open. So even if your site is closed, then your login page is accessible because otherwise people can't log in. Now we keep our sites open by default. So we did create a login page, but for our authors, it's easier to delete that than to create it. So that's why we created it for them. And if they want to close a site, all they need to do is to go to the site definition item, check the require login, and set a link to the login page, which was already provided. So that's pretty easy to close the site. Let's move on to some languages. So our environment, well, at the moment we have 5 and it will only grow. And we also have item language fallback enabled. So by default, if the code checks, everything exists. So we want our languages to be defined per site. We need a language list and we need a default language. The default language, that's an out-of-the-box setting. On the site definition item, you will find a drop-down with languages and we select the default. The language list, however, that's a bit of custom code. We took something similar to our Easy Lingo module, which was written years ago. And we need something for the language selector and a language resolver. We will add a property to the site definition called site languages, where we define the languages that we want on the site. You can use a language selector, which is an out-of-the-box component from SXA to select the language of your site. And that uses the language selector repository. We use the base function to just fetch the languages that are actually available. And then we filter them with the languages that are defined on the site. If any, of course, if they're not defined, we're not filtering. So that's pretty easy to fix the language selector. But we also want to stop people coming in with languages that we don't want. So we also add a language item resolver, patch it after the out-of-the-box one. We will verify the context language that's defined there with the site languages and then act accordingly. So redirect maybe if a language is requested that we don't want. But important here, really important, is to validate the request URL to make sure that, well, it's a content request, that it's not a Sitecore backend request or anything. So, well, we didn't tackle, I think, everything, but we can come to a conclusion because we do have, with all that we mentioned here, a result that gives our customer the opportunity to create a new website in 15 minutes, well, or even a lot less. So they start from the base site, they clone it. We have 2 site definitions because we also have a preview. And when the clone is ready, which doesn't take 15 minutes, we have a site which is ready for content entry. as we have seen, the site will still be flexible. We can still change quite a lot. It will be using a basic theme, a theme that was set up on the base site. But we have a list of themes available, so they can already switch it rather easily. And even if we need something really new, creating extra themes is rather easy. Because we already have themes, changing a few colors and such, that's not that much work. So we can do that pretty easy. And as themes are Sitecore items, we don't even need a real deploy to put that in production. But we got a site which is ready to use. Just need to publish it. And that concludes the session. If you have any questions, I guess you can ask them now, or you can find me on Slack, Twitter, Stack Exchange, anywhere in the Sitecore community.
Perfect. Thank you for that presentation. Good. Any questions from the audience?
No, we do not have questions from the audience this time. Thank you very much, Gert, and I do hope that others chip in and visit your blogs.
No problem. I maybe have one question in the other direction to the community. If anyone could do the same on SXA with JSS, please share, I'm interested.
Oh, actually, there is a question coming in right now. So Mark asks, did you establish governance rules around what sites are suited to this setup versus something more bespoke?
No, not really. Because, well, a few of those sites are already live, and the first one was pretty easy. Well, the second one actually required a custom theme. And actually now we notice that we can go really far, because now we almost live with sort of a, well, let's call it mini website that should have no relation to the corporate websites. We have a different logo, different theme, different everything, completely different URL actually. So far we're just doing everything. As long as it's, well, you should say not too big, but even though it doesn't matter whether you put 10 content pages in there or 100. As long as it fits the components that we have and the pages that are defined, anything can go in there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No one is coming in.
No, I think that concludes it. No more questions.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for letting me share this.
Thanks for finding the time and presenting it.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I have.
Is the time for solidarity in the face of this threat to all of humanity. I implore leaders to stand together and heed this appeal.